Well, good morning, Leanne, and rightly pointed out there, talking about the Constitution, and this three-day conference has been about exactly that, looking at our Constitution. Now, last year would have marked the 25th year of the implementation of our Constitution in its current form, and of course, we are here in Gallagher Estate looking at reflecting on those 25 years and also looking ahead in terms of what needs to happen, what needs to change perhaps, and also, just as South Africans, I suppose, just marking the space because this Constitution is a living document, or at least so we are told. But how do we give expression to what is contained and enshrined in this Constitution? Well, on day 3, we are going to try to run through as many of the themes as we can because, as you rightly pointed out, Leanne, thematic expressions of this Constitution that are being reflected upon at this conference. So I'm joined now by Advocate Lloyd Lotz, and he is the Chief Director for Constitutional Implementation. Thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
So this is a very important conference. If you look at what is being done here and, of course, the theme and the expression that is sought. But why are we having this particular event at this point?
Well, it's actually a very historic moment for South Africa, in particular for the Department of Justice, government as a whole, because we have this constitution which is hailed as one of the most progressive constitutions globally. And at the same time, we've got South Africa that has to ensure that this constitution is not just a living document, as you've just said, but it's one that is expressed in various ways. Because, of course, we've got our constitutional supremacy principle. We've also got human rights that we need to ensure that they are realized.
So if we look at, the conversations, the reflections and the road ahead, one would imagine that this is a conversation that should include all South Africans, because ultimately this applies to each and every one of us. And one of the things that I noted when I received the program first off, I couldn't help but think, okay, here we go again with the elite in society discussing this particular matter, which of course is very important to everybody. So how does broader South Africa get involved and have their opportunity to reflect and tell us what they feel about the Constitution?
Well, I'll take you back to 2001 when Cabinet actually approved the program for government to actually commemorate the Constitution. And there were quite a number of dialogues, symposia that were actually held across South Africa. So the discussion actually began 2 years ago. What we have here now, of course, is a conference. And at this conference, we have 500 guests that sort of joined us from day one. And these guests actually come from all walks of life. We've got students, we've got, traditional leaders, we've got community advice officers coming from across, the different provinces. And of course, we've got government and other stakeholders in terms of civil society. So there is some representation. And of course, you can only have so many people, being in one place. But the discussions and the dialogues, on this constitution sort of began in 2001, especially in terms of the theme of commemorating 25 years.
So what is the ultimate objective then?
Well, the objective is a simple one, actually. It's one to say that we really need to reflect on the past 25 years or so. We also need to ensure that we inspire active citizen participation. We need to ensure that we advance this constitution in various ways. One of the things that have actually come out in this conference over the past 2 days is that we need to actually enhance human rights education. In fact, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development actually even has a program that it has partnered with the Department of Basic Education and the South African Human Rights Commission in ensuring that we do human rights education in schools, targeting learners through the National Schools Moot Court competition. So there's various projects, various activities that we're actually doing to ensure that we try and include everyone, especially the young and the old, partnering with civil society and other stakeholders, the stakeholders that are actually here as well.
But I would imagine it's more than just trying to do it. It has to be done, because you talk about active citizens. How does a citizenry, become its best self in expressing itself and basically upholding its rights if it doesn't even know its rights? So I'm reminded of the fact that last year I was looking for that little booklet on the Constitution. I could not find one. For a number of days. I had to call people in order to lay my hands on one. And these things were freely available, readily available at some point. So simple gestures like that, what are you doing in that regard to make sure that the information, first and foremost, is readily accessible to the populace?
No, absolutely. It is a challenge, and I think it's one that we have realized. I think it was also emphasized yesterday as well, through one of the panels, to say that we need to have access to information. The citizenry. Even now we've got social media, we've got various platforms that we are utilizing, but we can't do it on our own. That is why it's important to ensure that the stakeholders that we are working with, that we continue to work with them, that we actually massify. As you speak about the Constitution, we need to ensure that these constitutions are available, accessible in all the languages, in all the different languages. But I think I emphasize the issue of schools, because you need to target schools, because that's where we have young minds who are being developed, and these young minds being developed are the ones that are the future. So we need to target those young people.
But you see, I take issue with you, Advocate Lotz, because as the Chief Director of Implementation, you talk a good game right now, because as you say, and rightly so, because you know that it has to be available to every citizen in this country in the language that they speak. But it isn't available. And the question has to be, in reflecting on this 25 years of the Constitution, why haven't you ensured that those documents are available, at the very least, as a starting point?
Well, I think even our Constitution itself says that, the state must fulfill the rights within the Bill of Rights. The state must ensure that it advances these human rights and protects them. So it does come back to the state and to us to say that we've got this obligation. And I think realizing the challenge, I know we speak that it's now 25 years later, not to say that it's not been available. I think what has not really happened well is to ensure that this Constitution in the various different languages, that it is, at every corner of South Africa. But like I'm saying now...
But when you say it's not that it's not available, where is it?
We have it.
If someone wanted a copy of the Constitution in Chitsonga right now, where would they be able to access it?
Well, that's why I'm saying that we realize it is a challenge, right? I'm saying that the constitutions are available. The state... the Department of Justice has these constitutions printed. As we speak now, we've printed millions of these constitutions, which are going to be dispersed to the different schools across the country. We've got a program that is actually being implemented as we speak. Why? Because of the project that I spoke to you about earlier, the National Schools Moot Court Competition. It's one of the projects, one of the avenues that we're going to be able to actually, through that project, be able to massify the so-called access, and through learners within communities. But we also need assistance. That is why even the stakeholders, we were saying to them, yes, fine. The guns are always pointed at us to say that you should be doing this and that, but we are also saying, help us. Give us ideas, and this is why we are here, and this is part of the discussion. We need your assistance, we need ideas. We also need to come up with innovative ways. Youngsters now are using smartphones, tablets and the like. So we need to be more innovative. So it's a challenge for us, but we are working on it, and I'm quite certain that we'll be able to achieve a much better outcome in as far as access with the stakeholders that we have. And I think with the commitments that have been given to us as well are quite inspiring.
So these documents, how many have you actually printed, and when will they be rolled out?
Well, we've got, I think, 6 million that have been that are being printed as we speak, that are currently in the process of being printed. We were aiming to actually have these, completed by the end of this month. So we are looking at the first, month in the next quarter of our financial year, because we need to have the project starting in April, in as far as the schools are concerned, working with the South African Human Rights Commission and basic education. So we have started. So I'm not speaking about an idea or an ideal. I'm speaking about something that is being done.
The proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. So we'll follow up, Advocate Lotz, as you, roll out this particular program, because I think it's important that we hold you accountable. And as much as you say you need assistance, I think accountability is part of rendering that assistance. But thank you so much for stopping by to speak to us. That was, of course, Advocate Lloyd Lotz, Chief Director of Constitutional Implementation in the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. So we are here at Gallagher Estate, and as you can see, still quiet. Many exhibitors, would be filling the spaces behind us and looking at various aspects of our Constitution, our rights as people in this nation, and of course others who come onto these grounds as South Africa, and what the rights they have and how we actually make sure that what is enshrined in the Constitution is given expression. Right, we're going to move on. Quite busy this morning as we try and catch up. I'm joined now by Dr. Abigail Noko, who's a UN regional representative from the Regional Office for Southern Africa. Dr. Noko, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, and good morning to all your listeners.
So I'd like to get your reflections first and foremost. Firstly on the 25 years of the South African Constitution, and perhaps also just for the benefit of our viewers to express that this would have been 25 years last year. This is actually the 26th year, but that's a technicality that we'll explain at another time. But in reflecting on those 25 years from an international perspective through the United Nations, what are your views?
Well, I have to first of all start off by saying that it really is quite a milestone, and that's the reason why the United Nations is here, part of this conference. It also happens to be that it coincides with the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And as you know, many countries around the world have taken inspiration from this document to inform their constitutions, just like South Africa did in terms of its Bill of Rights. So we really see this as an opportunity, really, for all countries around the world to take stock of where they are and how they can make a commitment to strengthen the architecture of the broader human rights system, nationally, regionally, and internationally. So I do think that this marks an important moment because everybody knows the journey traveled to get to this point. And so 25 years is an important moment of reflection to look back and also to determine what needs to be done going forward.
And as you say, a moment of reflection for us, Dr. Noko, and just looking at it from perhaps a broader bird's eye view, where do you think are some of the blind spots where South Africa could perhaps strengthen in its constitution?
Well, I thought it was interesting from day one. A lot of the conversation in this conference was highlighting the fact that we needed to bring the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, closer to people. And I think the spirit and the essence of this Constitution is really the fulfillment of socioeconomic rights. And I think that needs to be seen as an accelerator in order to really fulfill the ideals of this, beautiful Constitution that this country has. And I think a lot of the discussion at the conference has highlighted that people on the ground need to feel the heartbeat of this Constitution.
And you have the advantage of, working across the region as well. And one is loath to do it because, as they say, comparisons are odious, but it could be helpful as well just to compare and contrast what's happening in the rest of the region. And how do we actually compare? Because we would like to think that we are this shining light. We have a constitution that's been lauded the world over, but what could we learn from our neighbors and what could they learn from us?
Well, I think the point really is that there is no country that's spared of challenges. And I think that's the first point to make. At the same time, no country is an island. So everybody benefits from its neighbors, from its region. And I think it's really important also to recognize the important role that Africa plays. I think what's really interesting by way of example is that the human rights struggle in this country really inspired international treaties, such as the International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And in fact, it is for that reason that for the world, we celebrate 21 March as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So it just goes to show that what happens in a country can affect a region and it can affect the world. And I think that's very important to bear in mind, that good neighborly relations, promoting the positive ideals of this country are really important. Having said that, I do think it's fair to say that there are a number of countries in the sub-region as well that have positive constitutions as well. And many countries in this region look to each other to find best practices, to find better ways of being able to inform the way they implement rights across the board.
And from the United Nations perspective, is there anything particularly worrisome about South Africa, in the Constitution and its implementation at this stage?
Well, I think, in fact, South Africa will be before the Universal Periodic Review, where it's basically a peer review mechanism between member states that will essentially assess and determine the progress that South Africa has been made. And I think what's interesting there is that there are a lot of positive things, of course, to say, but there are a number of challenges. And I think we'll have to wait for that adoption to take place to make the determination. But there are, of course, a number of recommendations. And I think what they really point to is the issue around inequality, the issue around poverty, and the issue around unemployment, really being drivers of the fact that those are the key issues that really need to be addressed.
Indeed, and those are the things that I think bedevil our social cohesion as a nation as well. But just final words of advice for us as South Africa as we deliberate and reflect and look at the road ahead?
Well, really, it's quite simple. Join the campaign: equality, dignity, and freedom for all.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Noko there. And of course, speaking to us from a broader perspective, looking at what's happening in the Southern African region. And of course, she speaks on behalf of the United Nations in that regard. And very interesting, as Dr. Noko says, we'll have to wait and see what those recommendations will say. But all in all, we all have something to learn from one another with regard to the things that work, the things that perhaps don't work so well in our constitutions. But as she started by pointing out as well the fact that people wanted to know why this wasn't naturally taken more to the people. But you heard Advocate Lotz pointing out that there will be opportunity to do that, and that they are printing 6 million documents of the South African Constitution in the official languages, all official languages, and these will be rolled out and will be available, especially in schools, through the programs that will be undertaken there. So we'll talk more about the South African Constitution, 25 years of reflection, and of course the road ahead.